Hey everyone. So we're getting closer to completing the review of ISO 9001 2015. We already went through all the clauses except for 9 and 10. So almost there. A few more videos. So they're the two smaller clauses. 9 has a few subclauses I'll get to more detail on in separate videos, but clause 9 is essentially the the evaluation piece. So, how are you doing as a business? And of course, if you're going to follow ISO and have a good quality system in place, you have to have a way of tracking how you're doing. You have to have customer feedback, ways of capturing that and handling feedback from the customer, client, and then ways of tracking what you are doing internally, whether you have a quality team or not. You have to have someone, whoever that may be, to monitor and evaluate through audits, surveillances, whatever you may want to call it, to ensure that you're doing what you should be doing per whatever your documents you've created, to ensure that you're meeting your customer and or client's requirements. All right, so that's the gist of clause 9, and I'll have a few extra short videos on the separate subclauses within it. Hey everyone, back with you. So we're into clause 9 of ISO 9001 2015, specifically 9.1 and its subclause 9.1.1, which looks at monitoring, measuring, analysis, evaluation of the system that you have put together, the requirements you have. So again, depending on the business, the company, the project, program, whatever size, whatever you're doing, you have requirements from your customer and or client. You have to find a way to ensure that you're actually doing it. So that's where the the check comes into play. So not all companies, of course, have a quality team. They have, whoever might be assigned to do it. They should, of course, be separate from all other areas. They should be answering to the top. They should be knowledgeable in the standard that's being audited, whether it is the quality system or safety, environmental, IT, or whatever else it may be, right? You shouldn't just throw someone in there to do it. They're going to be creating a checklist based off of whatever the requirements are. You can Google it. You can search and see a whole bunch of different ISO checklists out there to use, but not everyone audits against ISO specifically because depending on the size of the business, you have your own system in place. You have your own documents. You have your own way of tracking what you're supposed to be doing for your customer and or client. So you may be auditing against those documents. So you may have a standard operating procedure, work instruction, plan, whatever it is you're calling it in your business, that you're going to build your checklists off of, because that's what you as a business designed to be successful for your customer and or client. So again, this part is just about putting together a system within your quality plan on how you as a business will keep an eye on all those different activities that have been developed for you to be successful. So no matter who does it, it has to be checked by someone who's competent, who knows what they're looking for, knows how to put together, because it's all about checks and balances. We want to make sure that what we wrote is successful for our customer. We want to, I've seen it happen so many times. We build something and we just don't maintain it, and that's a problem. So we had to keep an eye on it, make sure we're doing it, because we're all here. No matter what we're doing as a business, we're here for our customer and client. Hey everyone. All right, so moving further into ISO 9001 2015 clause 9, 9.1.2, customer satisfaction. So we've already talked about that in previous videos. It's been in previous clauses, but there has to be now a check on that process, that system. So depending on the business, what you do, the size, you'll have some kind of system to collect feedback from your customer and or client. Now, oftentimes it is a survey type of system. Again, it varies, depends on what you're doing, how large of a company you are. There may be other ways to collect feedback that's more beneficial for you, but there has to be a system, a process in place to ensure that you do collect feedback, right? That's why this clause is here. You're checking to make sure that what you established earlier in the clauses is there and being worked, right? So you want to be able to hear from your customer, right? So if they're responding to you, you need to be responding back. That's going to be part of the, whatever you want to call it, an audit or review of this piece within the quality system, that you are receiving feedback and that you are responding to the feedback. There may be times where you receive negative feedback that you as a business has to capture as a non-conformance because you did something incorrect, right? So there may be times you have to write up a non-conformance report against a customer feedback that you receive. So keep that in mind as well. Again, not everything we get from our customer and client is positive, right? No one out there is perfect. Whether they are correct or not, they're the customer, and it's up to the business to do their best to try to correct the issue or identify that, it's not actually us. It's not our fault. We followed the process as outlined, whatever it may be. As I said in a previous video a while back, customer is not always right. That's especially in the service industry, not always considered a good thing. And I'm sure there's plenty of people out there who disagree with me. But, at least in my world, the customer is not always right. And we have documented information to show that. So we have to go to our client to show that. And then we get that all straight down, right? But it's just important that you have this and you're monitoring it. Hey, everyone. So hope everyone's having a great day wherever you are. I'm going to continue to discuss Clause 9, specifically for this video, 9.1.3, which is the analysis and evaluation of your business, of your quality system. Right, so it's making sure that we're doing what we're supposed to do. There's different ways of doing it. There's different aspects to look at. Oftentimes when you analyze data and evaluate how you're doing, there's going to be reports, showing how you're doing in the various aspects of whatever your business is. You're going to look at audit, surveillance reports, making sure you're meeting compliance to your customer and or client's requirements. You may have metrics and data and key performance indicators and a whole bunch of other stuff to let you know how you're doing in all the different aspects of what you're doing. Those have to be reviewed. They have to be monitored for meeting your requirements. Customer feedback is important. How are you doing in their eyes? That's part of what you have to analyze and evaluate. All that eventually feeds into your management review, which is going to be a later video. It's 9.3. But management reviews look at all the aspects of the quality system, the business system, right? So all the different elements of all the clauses that we've already gone through, to include clause 10 that we will be going through, are a part of that review, looking at how we are doing as a business, company, program, project, and how can we do better, right? So no matter the size of the business, there should be something in place to ensure that you are doing what you need to do for your customer and client. Oftentimes you'll have something more extravagant, a lot more reports and all these different metrics all over the place, charts and stuff, the bigger the business you are. But it's all about just ensuring that you have something in place, especially if you have a quality system, especially if you want to follow ISO, that you have something documented. All right. Hey everyone, let's dive into the inputs of a management review for Clause 9.3 in ISO 9001 2015. I'm going to do 2 videos on this. I'm going to split the inputs in half because there's a lot. All right, so first up is previous actions. So from the previous management review, was there anything brought up that you need to track? You don't want to forget stuff. So that is there as the input to remind you, oh yeah, that's right. That came up in the last meeting. I don't want to forget to follow up on that, and I'll throw in an update on that. Next, depending on the business size, you may have a different amount of functional areas involved in your management review. So it depends on how you want to break it down. But how are they meeting, or you as a business meeting your quality policy and objectives, or not meeting it? So that input is to ensure that you're tracking your quality policy objectives. You may have 1, you may have 5, who knows? You as a business determines that. But you have to show how you are doing that through documentation. So you input that into your the input. Just remember, data documentation is important to feed the review. All right, you can't just throw in, oh, doing great, meeting requirements. Okay, how? Show me. All right, next, how many audits are being conducted, internal and external? Because you may have third parties coming in and auditing your system as well as you internally. Were there any nonconformances found? Yes, no. If there were, how many, and what were they, and how did you correct them? Monitoring and measuring. So this is important depending on what a business has as a requirement. A business may have a certain requirement from a customer or client that says you're going to do X, Y, and Z 90% of the time. So you have to have a way to show you're meeting that. So you have to have a system in place to monitor requirements and measure to ensure that you're meeting that percentage. That's an example, right? Next, do you have subcontractors? Do you have vendors? Do you have suppliers? You have to keep an eye on that, because even if you pass a risk to them, you still may be liable for their actions. So you have to keep an eye on them. So this input is there to ensure that you, if you have any, are monitoring those suppliers for them meeting your requirements, so you in turn meet your customer and or client's requirements, right? So that's the first half of the inputs. I'll get into the next half in the next video. Hope everyone's doing good out there. All right, so now we have made it to 9.2, which is an important one within Clause 9. So a business creates a quality system. Everything we've already gone through is establishing that. Oftentimes, and I've seen this happen with a lot of businesses, a lot of companies I have interacted with, they go to a third party to document their quality system because they don't have anyone within their company that can do that. So documenting, creating your system is one thing. Following it is another. So Clause 9.2 is auditing. So you have to have internal audits of your system to ensure that what you documented, what you said you're going to do, you're actually doing. So whoever is chosen to do those audits has to be impartial. They have to be separate from all the areas they're auditing. And again, a lot of businesses, a lot of companies out there don't have a quality team in place, so they had to pick people to do it, which I don't really agree with. You need to dedicate a quality function in your business to be on top of all your actions at all times, because they have to have some experience in auditing. Can't really just throw someone in there. People might think it's easy. You have to have certain people that can do it. So 9.2 is important because you have to have something documented as a system of audits. So, how often are you going to audit? What are you going to audit? Of course, you should be auditing against whatever the requirement you have as a business, what you have designed for the success of your business, for your customer and our client. So that quality person, whoever it is that's doing the audit, is going to create their checklist based on all those requirements. They're going to go out and they're going to check, and they're going to look at paper or in a system to look at documented information that it was done. All right. So again, different companies might do it at different times. I prefer doing it against risk of the service, but other companies may want to just decide to go out and we'll do audits every 6 months or once a year or once a month or whatever. I don't know, but it should be risk based in reality, right? Which is talked about earlier in ISO. So again, 9.2 just ensures that you as a business establishes a frequency of audits to ensure that you're doing what you say you're going to be doing, right? Hey everyone, so we have made it to the last part of Clause 9. That's 9.3. I'll probably do a few short videos on this one to break it down more and have enough time because there's a lot of little things that's a part of this. But 9.3 is the management review. So again, what you have set up and designed as a business needs to be reviewed every now and then, right? So on top of audits that we talked about, 9.2, leadership needs to come together to discuss various aspects of the quality system and make sure they're keeping an eye on their part. So there's, again, I'll talk about it in separate videos, but there's inputs, there's outputs. I'll do those separate. But the reviews, and again, it depends on the size of the company. It depends on each business how they want to do it. Some are once a year. Some are once a year. It can take all day. Who knows how long? Because it depends on how big the business is. I've heard of some that will take 8 hours to do an annual review. There's some that might do it every month, every other month, every 6 months. The point is that leadership is looking, right? They're reviewing it. It's important to have data, to have actual numbers, information that is tied to documents, because in the end, the whole idea is that you've been doing something and you have that to show that, yes, I'm doing that. And I've seen it many times where they'll say, oh, we're doing a great job, or we're providing excellent service to the customer, or they'll put NA or nothing to report, which isn't really good. There's really very few areas in a management review that will be empty. But the whole thing is to look at the health of your system. So saying you're doing great is not helpful if you have no data behind it to show that you are doing a good job for the review. So just remember that, yeah, you are doing the review, but it has to be useful as a business, of course, that you are participating. All the leaders are participating in that review, keeping an eye on the health of the system that was designed for you to be successful for your customer and or client. All right, so more to follow, more on this in some future. Hey everyone, let's dive into the inputs of a management review for Clause 9.3 in ISO 9001:2015. I'm going to do 2 videos on this. I'm going to split the inputs in half because there's a lot. All right, so first up is previous actions. So from the previous management review, was there anything brought up that you need to track? You don't want to forget stuff. So that is there as the input to remind you, oh yeah, that's right. That came up in the last meeting. I don't want to forget to follow up on that, and I'll throw in an update on that. Next, depending on the business size, you may have a different amount of functional areas involved in your management review. So it depends on how you want to break it down, but how are they meeting, or you as a business meeting your quality policy and objectives, or not meeting it? So that input is to ensure that you're tracking your quality policy objectives. You may have 1, you may have 5, who knows? You as a business determines that. But you have to show how you are doing that through documentation. So you input that into your the input. Just remember, data documentation is important to feed the review. All right, you can't just throw in, oh, doing great, meeting requirements. Okay, how? Show me. All right, next, how many audits are being conducted, internal and external? Because you may have third parties coming in and auditing your system as well as you internally. Were there any nonconformances found? Yes, no. If there were, how many, and what were they, and how did you correct them? Monitoring and measuring. So this is important depending on what a business has as a requirement. A business may have a certain requirement from a customer or client that says you're going to do X, Y, and Z 90% of the time. So you have to have a way to show you're meeting that. So you have to have a system in place to monitor requirements and measure to ensure that you're meeting that percentage. That's an example, right? Next, do you have subcontractors? Do you have vendors? Do you have suppliers? You have to keep an eye on that, because even if you pass a risk to them, you still may be liable for their actions. So you have to keep an eye on them. So this input is there to ensure that you, if you have any, are monitoring those suppliers for them meeting your requirements, so you in turn meet your customer and or client's requirements, right? So that's the first half of the inputs. I'll get into the next half in the next video. And well, let's dive into the remaining inputs into a management review. All right, so the next one to talk about is the external or internal issues. So external, again, from outside your company, how is it impacting your business? Internal, what's happening inside your business, what's changed. You may change your processes for a reason. You can annotate that. There may be a customer or client change to their requirement, which is an external issue that affected you internally. Right. Next up is customer satisfaction, customer feedback. As we've already gone through, customer feedback is important. It's in a previous clause. You have to have something in place to track that. Again, as I've said before, data, numbers, documentation is important. So how are you doing with your customer? What kind of feedback are you getting? Do you have a system in place that can capture, percentage-wise how you're doing, right? Plus, you might also get feedback from outside of your customer comment card program, as an example. You may have meetings with the customer and client to discuss things. Heck, they might grade you. It depends on what you are doing as a business. All right, next up is process performance. How are you doing for complying to your requirements? So is the system you built working? Is it compliant to your customer and or client's requirements? Again, you have to have a way of tracking that. And you could do that through quality control checks within a process. You could even technically use any internal audits you have to show that you are compliant. Maybe some external audits, third-party audits. Next up is opportunities for improvement. So how are you improving things? Do you have a process improvement program in place, which was, again, a previous clause in ISO to think about and design how you capture process improvements. So annotate what you've been doing to improve what you have internally for your customer and client. All right, then next is looking at risk. Risk is everywhere. We have risks all the time. You should already have that identified. Are your mitigation actions working? Has anything new come up? Have you had any opportunities? That's where that input goes. And lastly, resources. Again, we need to track what we need to be successful for our customer and our clients. So that's for that input. Do you have any resource issues? Annotate that. And then that way you can track that through these management reviews. All right. Welcome back. So this is the last part of 9.3 that I'm going to cover, and that is the outputs of a management review. Luckily, there's only a few compared to the inputs. So improvements. What improvements are you tracking? That is one output. All right. The second one is what changes have you made to your document system, whatever you may have. Forms, work instructions, standard operating procedures, whatever it may be. What has been changed? And, that's one of the outputs is to track that. And lastly, resources. This is an important one. So things may come up during each of these management reviews, depending on how often you have it, where resources is an issue, either staffing or equipment or whatever it may be, and you want to track that. So that is one of the outputs, and that's something to monitor for future management reviews, right? So once all this is done, then you, of course, have meeting minutes to record that you actually did do the management review. That's part of your records. And, that's it. You review the inputs, the outputs, however often you want to do it as a business, and you are monitoring, you're tracking your system in place to be successful for yourself and for your customer and our client. So that is 9.3 management review, and that closes out clause 9 of ISO 9001-2015. So next up is clause 10, which is the last one. All right, so more to follow on that.